education is such an important part of our lives. And one of the secrets of a really good, successful education are great teachers. Teachers are kind of like the learning coaches that help us learn things. And I'm remembering an experience that I had with a teacher. I wanted to be an airplane pilot. Unfortunately, I wasn't born in the 1800s, so I couldn't fly in that flying bathtub thing that Tobias showed, but I really wanted to fly an airplane, and so I signed up to take flying lessons. And in the flying lessons, it was so exhilarating, so exciting, just take off up in the air. And I finished my first lesson, and I said, I want another one, I want another one. And they said, well, you have to wait. I said, no, I want it right now. He said, no, you have to wait. Why? Why do I have to wait? And they said, because they've learned that if you don't take these lessons and give yourself a pause in between, you don't remember as much information. And I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute, because that's true in our courses, and that's why we try to stage, that's why we try to separate so students don't take just one subject, but they take several subjects at once, because you retain more, you learn more. And in fact, I wrote a paper because some of the schools were thinking that it's better if you have some students just take one subject at a time. So I compiled all of the research about that subject, and it is a fact that you do much better if you kind of stage yourselves. But anyway, when I was flying, I got to my 6th lesson, and the instructor was working with me on landings and takeoffs. Taking an airplane off a little private plane is real easy. You get on the end of the runway, you push the throttle all the way in, and the plane starts rumbling down the field, and then when it gets up to a certain speed, it just lifts off. You don't have to be very clever to do it. Now, you should be watching the airspeed indicator so that you don't take off before you have enough speed to hold yourself up, or you go, I never tried that. But landing is another thing. In the first place, it really works better, and you guys that are going to become pilots, you want to remember this. This is a little tip. It works better if you land where the runway is. In fact, it's really important. But to get an airplane on the runway is important, and you have to get the airplane pointing straight down the runway. Some of you maybe don't realize that if you crock a plane, you can go in kind of sideways. And in fact, that's what you do as you're making approach in a crosswind. If the runway's going this way and the wind's blowing like that, if you go straight in towards the runway, the wind will blow you away from the runway. So as you're coming in on your final approach, you turn the airplane into the wind a little bit, just a little bit, so you stay right lined up with the runway. So you're going in kind of crooked, which is really weird. And then when you get real close to the runway, if you land crooked, your wheels aren't lined up, and that wouldn't be cool. And so then you turn like the runway, but so that you are able to stay on the runway, you tilt the plane, and you go in like that and let one go down to the other. Well, anyway, on my 6th lesson, the instructor had me do some touch and goes. Touch and go. You take off, you come around the pattern, on base, downwind, and final, and you land, but then you power back up, and without even stopping, you take off again. So it's a touch and go. It's a great way to practice, and you practice different kinds of landings. Sometimes you can be landing in what's called a soft field. Might be a runway with some snow or some ice on it, could be in a dirt field, and you power a little bit differently if you're going to do a soft field landing, crosswind landing. So we practice all those different things. And then we went in, and he says, okay, let's do a full stop. So we pulled off the runway, stopped the airplane. He asked me to shut the engine down. And then he opened his door, and he said, okay, now you do it on your own. And I remember thinking, I didn't think he was going to do that already. And so he says, "You're ready." So I closed the door and he started walking away. We're out in the middle of the airport. It was a small airport. So I started the engine. I knew how to taxi around. I got down the end of the runway. I did a fresh run up. You know, before you take off an airplane, you pull around by the end of the runway, a little bit crosswise of it, and then you power the engine up to a good power setting with your brakes on and check all the gauges, make sure the engine's running real well before you try taking off. And then you pull the power out, and I went around and lined up on the end of the runway, and I thought, I know I can take this plane off, but if I can't land it, we're going to be in a world of hurt because it's just me. And it's quite an experience, quite a thrill. And so I powered up and ran down the runway, went up and did turn left, and then I turned on base, so I'm flying parallel with the runway going back, and for our little plane, we would cut off the engine right when we were even with the end of the runway, and then we would go down and turn and coast down gradually. As I was coming in on final, my knee was shaking. This isn't good. But it was just the attention and the excitement of thinking, can I really do this myself? And you can tell I made it. But it was kind of an interesting, important step in my experience of becoming a pilot. But I tell you about it because while I became a very good pilot, I believe, and I spent a lot of hours flying, every 2 years, a private pilot has to take a flight review. And so I was doing my biannual flight review, and I was with an instructor, a teacher, and I went around and he said, okay, now do a soft field landing. So I did my soft field landing. And then I did another landing, which was supposed to be a crosswind landing. And he says, Roger, on both your landings, you landed far to the left of the center line. I said, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. You actually you came in, the center line was over here, and you were over on the left side, both times. I said, I don't do that. He said, yeah, you really did. So we went around on the next landing, and we were coming down. I was almost ready to flare. And he said, look where you are. There was this, and he was right. And you know, I was sure he was wrong because I wouldn't land way over to the left, but I had gotten in the habit of putting the center line off to the left, which isn't good. You want to be right in the center of that runway. And sometimes you need an instructor, a teacher, to kind of help guide you back on path. And that's why I think that teachers are the real secret sauce of Acellus. And leveraging teachers is really what Acellus is all about, I think.